Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of the book of Eov, the book of Job, Sefer Eov, and we are about to read chapter 13. In chapter 12, we heard Eov responding to his three friends, and he told them that everyone knows, the whole world knows, even the animals, even the earth itself knows that we can't understand the ways of God. Everyone knows that we don't see justice in this world. We see evil prosper. We see the good people suffer. Everybody knows this. So don't try, like his friends are trying to say, oh no, if God is making you suffer, it must be that you're a sinner, right? Because when you say that, that assumes that you know and understand how God's justice works. And we don't. Because innocent people do suffer, and there is no explanation. There is no explanation that we as human beings can understand. Only God can understand that. So when I say that we don't understand the ways of God, right, I am truly the one who's respecting God. You are truly the one who is disrespecting him by saying that you think that your human mind can understand God's justice. Now, today, Eov focuses on himself. Like he said, yes, the whole world knows how the world works. The whole world sees innocent people suffering. And now Eov talks about himself. And I too, hen kol, this is verse 1, ro'asa eini. I have seen everything, all of this that I have told you about before. I have seen it myself. I mean, look at me. Shama azni. I've seen it with my eyes, I've heard it with my ears, vatovinla, and I have understood it. I have understood that the ways of God cannot be understood. Kidatchem, just like you have knowledge, yadati gam ani. I also know things. You know, you observe the world and you claimed, like, remember how Eliphaz claimed that, I've seen that everything in the world works out justly and right in the end. Well, no, I also know. Lo nofel anochi mikem. I am not going to fall. I am not going to lose this argument with you. I'm not going to change my knowledge, my wisdom, because of your false accusations. Ulam, however, ani el Shaddai adaber. I would rather talk to God than to talk to you. V'hocheach el echpatz. What I want, the one who I want to argue with, is with God. I'm not interested in listening to you anymore. You don't understand God, right? You claim these things and they're not true. I want to talk to God. I want to argue with him. Because, yes, I don't understand him. So then what's the meaning? What's the purpose? What's the point of me living here? If we don't have justice in this world, why am I going through this, right? Remember, as Eov has said repeatedly many times, Ulam ani, I'm sorry, I just read that. That was verse 3. And verse 4, Ulam atem tov sheker. However, you guys are just plopping lies. You're just spewing forth lies. Rofei elil kucham. You all are a bunch of quack doctors. Rofei elil, false doctors. You're giving out remedies, telling me to repent, and that's not the problem. Mi tein hacharesh tachishun. If only somebody could shut you guys up, quiet you guys down. Utihilacham lechachma. That would be wisdom. That would be a lot smarter. You'd appear a lot smarter if you just stopped talking than if you continued saying all this silliness. Shimu natochachti. Listen to me. Listen to my criticisms. V'rivot vasai. Akshivu. So here Eov is holding on to the hope that he can explain to the friends so that they can come to understand this. So Eov is bouncing back and forth between, I don't want to talk to you guys, but he's still saying, no, but I do want to talk to you, right? And we're going to see that kind of tension play out throughout this chapter. I do want to talk to you because we see that Eov actually wants to maintain this conversation, despite the fact that these friends have not been the most comforting, to say the least. But having them there and talking to them is somewhat of a comfort to Eov, and we'll see that more as we read through this chapter. Listen to what my arguments say. Hala'el tidabru avla. In other words, I'm criticizing you because what? You think that can you tell God that he is making a mistake? Would you tell God? In other words, Basically that's what you're doing, right? Because you're claiming that suffering only happens when someone deserves it. So then when you see suffering that you can't explain, and think in your mind, God forbid, a child with cancer or something awful like that, so then you're going to tell God, hey, God, you made a mistake. Is that what you're going to do? Right? In other words, according to your set of logic, where you think that you understand God, right, then that's your only choice. Or there is actually another choice. Velo tidabru remia. Or will you speak falsely regarding him, meaning, right, or are you going to lie and say, right, oh, that really that righteous person is actually a sinner, like make up some kind of nonsense, why that person deserves it. We know he's innocent. So either you have to be lying to yourself, or you have to call God and say that he's making a mistake. In other words, but me, Eov is saying, I'm saying I don't understand. I'm not claiming that I know. So I don't have to go. In other words, if you can carry that logic, the logic of the three friends, to its conclusion, you're left with these two choices, Eov is saying. Either telling you are arrogant to tell God that he's making a mistake, or you have to make up all kinds of lies that aren't true in order to justify what you see. And if you do that, the latter one, hafanov tisaon, will you flatter him? Right? Will you be tisaon? This is like to flatter somebody. There's a lot of colloquialisms in this, but they're probably not appropriate for this podcast, right? In other words, you're just cozying up to God and saying, "Oh yeah, God, you really know what you're doing." I mean, is that how you're dealing with God? That's if you take the second option, or if you took the first option, el terivon, or will you argue with him, meaning and say that he's making a mistake? Again, these same two options are your only ones, right? Is that the path you're going to take? Hatov ki yachkor etzchem, right? But if you take either approach, right, of those two approaches, right? How good will it go when he searches you out, right? Im kihatel be'enosh tihatlubo. Are you able to fool? I'm sorry, tihatelu right? Im kihatel be'enosh tihatelu. Can you fool God just like you fool a human being? In other words, with a person, you can flatter him and say, "Oh yeah, whatever." A powerful person, even when he's wrong, people like to be his yes man and flatter him, right? And if they feel capable, they might criticize a person. Can you play with God this way? It doesn't work that way. God knows exactly what's going on, right? He knows that you're playing games. He knows that you're not being honest with yourself. That's the main thing. He knows that you're not being truthful with yourself. And because he knows you're not being truthful, in other words, God wants us to see the world as it is. He wants us to see that we don't understand the justice in this world. He wants us to know that he is different from us. He's going to punish you. He's going to rebuke you. If you go and you start, in your heart just trying to flatter him, like he's some kind of a tyrant, and you have to make him feel good, right? Make God feel good and say, "Oh yeah, you're really right. You're really right, because it must be that person deserves it," right? Rather than that, it's much better to confront the leader and say, much more honest, to say, "No, I'm sorry, this is wrong, or at least it looks wrong to me, and I don't understand. Explain it to me." That's much more intellectually honest. If you deal with God in that way, then you're going to end up suffering God's wrath. You will be terrified by this se'es that you are doing to him. Se'es meaning that flattery that you're giving to God. I know there's a lot of translations here, but I don't have. It would take hours and hours if I went through each and every word and explained why I'm choosing my translations for each one. But I chose se'eso, meaning not the God's threat, which is one of the translations that's out there, but rather se'eso. That se'es, that panem tisaon, which we just talked about in verse 10 and several prior verses, that flattery of God, in other words, the flattery that you're doing towards God, that will end up being fearful to you. Upachto, and his fear, right? Yipol alechem, will fall upon you. Zichronechem mishle efer. Your mentionings, the things which you mention, are just are proverbs of nothingness. In other words, all these nonsense that you're saying, that you're going on and on, just babbling on, are mishle efer. You're saying all these platitudes about greatness of God, but it's a baloney. It's like ash. It's like nothing. Legabe chomer gabechem. This is even more difficult to translate. It's kind of like Legabe. There's various ways to translate this, but I'm going to go with like the Ramban here. Legabe chomer gabechem. Your bodies are like are made of chomer, are made of raw materials, are made of clay. So in other words, the things that you say, that you speak, are false. Your entire being is nothing. It's just chomer, right? And you're going to somehow try to flatter God. You're going to try to argue with God. Hacharishu mimeni. What should you do, right? Just be quiet and listen to me. In other words, be quiet because of me. In other words, be quiet and listen. Va'adabra ani, and let me speak. V'yavor alai ma, and whatever happens, happens. Alma esav v'sari b'shinoi. I apologize for the phone sound there. Alma esav v'sari b'shinoi. How long will I carry my flesh in my teeth? I'll explain this in a second. V'nafshi asim b'chapi, and will I put my soul in my hand? In other words, how long will I suffer so, where everything, my entire body and my soul, is I'm carrying myself. I'm carrying those burdens myself. There's, again, a lot of ways to understand this. The way I understand this is that Eov is saying, I want to talk to you. Listen to me. Talk to me. Engage with me. Here we're starting to see a little bit, with all of his anger and frustration with his friends, he's begging them to stick around. I don't want to carry my entire burden on my own. Hein yikteleni lo ayachel. This is an interesting pasuk here. There's an interesting verse. It's true. He may kill me, but I will still hope for him. In other words, don't think, Eov is saying, that my anger here means that I'm abandoning God. This is key here. I still ayachel. I still hope for God. I'm arguing with him. I'm upset. I'm angry. But I want to talk to him. Ach derachai el panav ochiach. However, my way is that I want to argue. Right? I want to be able to debate God. I want to ask him why. I want to ask him what's going on. In other words, I'm being natural. I'm being true to myself. I want God. I desire God. Even if he would kill me, I still want him. Right? But what I want is to argue. I want to know. I want to understand what's the point, what's going on. Gamuhu li Yeshua. He is to me this is for me my salvation. This ability to argue, this ability to recognize the truth and stand true to what I see as the truth. That is my Yeshua. That's the only thing that I have, Eov was saying. I have nothing. I lost everything, physically everything. The only thing I have is my truth, is what's in my heart. It's what I know. Ki lo lefanab chanef yavo. Before God, a chanef, a person who is a flatterer, has no place in front of God. Someone who's going to come into God and make up nonsense like you, God has no interest in such a person. God wants me to come as I am. He wants me to come with the truth. He doesn't want me to come in front of him making up nonsense. Shim'u shamoa milasi. Listen to what I'm telling you. V'achvasi. Now here, this word achva, most of the commentaries understand this to mean his speech. But I think that achva is actually here reference to the Hebrew word achva, which means brotherhood, right? Right? My friendship with you. Let that be in your ears. Think about my love for you. Listen to me, Eov is saying to his friends. Listen to me and learn this lesson. I'm not just prattling on and complaining against God like you guys think I am. I love God. I want God, right? but I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. I'm trying to argue with him because I want to know. Hine no arachti mishpat, Eov says in verse 18. I have set up a good case, right? I'm an innocent man and I'm suffering terribly. Yadati ki ani stuck. I know very well that I am going to be righteous. That if I go before God and ask Him, why am I suffering? Why do I deserve it? And I claim that I don't deserve it. I will be right. I know that. Mihu yarivi madi. Who is it that can argue with me? Nobody else knows me more than me. Right? In other words, no one, nobody can argue. Even God, who knows me more than me, knows that I'm right. Now, if I would go ahead and be quiet, I would die. The only thing keeping me alive is my ability to speak the truth, is my knowledge of the truth. That's the only thing I have. If I gave that up, if I couldn't talk anymore, if I couldn't argue anymore, I would die. I beg you, listen to me, but please don't do one of these two things. So that I shouldn't have to hide from you. In other words, I want you to stay here. I want you to be here. I don't want to have to look away. So please, don't do one of the following two things. Number one, kapcha me'olai harchak. Do not. Now, there's various ways of understanding this kapcha. Some people understand that it's kaf from their hit. In other words, don't hit me. But Rashi, and I agree with Rashi very strongly on this one, I think it just doesn't make any sense. Nobody's hitting anybody here. It's just, and why would he beg them? What it means is, like Rashi says, don't force me, and don't scare me, right? What does that mean? In other words, please continue to talk to me, right? Don't force me to be quiet by leaving, right? And don't scare me. Don't threaten me, right? In other words, be patient with me, calm. Listen to what I'm saying, right? Right? Don't force me by arguing so strongly that I can't. That I have to be quiet, because I just told you the only thing I have is my truth, right? And don't try and don't scare me. And then if you call out to me and talk to me, I will answer you and we can engage in conversation. O adaber, or I will talk Pashiveni and you will answer me. And then he goes on in verse 23. Kamali. So this is what I'm saying. Kamali avonus v'chataos. How many sins and transgressions do I have? Tell me how many things I've been negligent in, how many things I've missed in my life. You know, they're piddly, they're nothing. Lama fanecha tastir. Don't turn your face from me. Don't hide from me. And think that I'm some kind of an enemy. Stop criticizing me. You know that I'm a good person. You guys have known me for a long time. You know, maybe I made a mistake here or there. That's fine. But you know that I don't deserve this. Let's be honest. He'eleni daf ta'arots. Are you going to chase after a dried leaf? You have no. Is that what you're gonna do? You're just gonna bang down somebody because he's down? You know, like you step on a dried leaf and crunch it. It's like, is that what you're doing? Viet kashya veishterdof, and you're going to chase after a dried out straw that just flies away in the wind, and you're just chasing after it. Like, what's the point in that? Ki tichtov alai merarot, that you decide to write about me, say about you're here, like writing in the sense of making a decree, like writing that evil things, bitter things are you deserve. Vitorisheni avonos neurai, and you're going to tell me that the sins of my childhood that are what should be dragging me down. So in other words, you're telling me, oh, when I was a kid once, in elementary school, you stole a candy bar. Things like, this is what you're gonna do, and you're gonna drag up things from my past and say this is why I deserve this. Vatosem basad raglai, that you should go and put and put my feet in plaster Now, this is not talking about like the old mafia, cement boots and throw someone in the water. This means um, there's a lot of ways to understand this. Different commentaries say different things, but I want to read this verse and I'll tell you the way I see it. Mostly drawn from kind of like a conglomeration of the commentaries. V'tishmor kol chasai, you're going to watch all of my paths. Al sharshay raglai titchakeh. Are you going to be writing down every single footstep of mine? In other words, remember he said before, you're gonna look up, you're gonna dig up all of the transgressions of my youth. You're gonna go back to when I was in second grade. I said something not nice about Joey who was sitting next to me. Is that what you're gonna do? So in this verse, he's saying, you're gonna watch all, because if you put a plaster on someone's feet, and this is what they would do with prisoners so they can't run away and can be tracked. This is an ancient practice. You put it in plaster so that when they walk, you can, if they try to run away, you can follow their footsteps and catch them. So is this what you're going to do? Are you going to v'tishmarkel? Are you going to watch all of my ways? In other words, you're going to see, did I go this way, that way? And you're going to follow every single one of my footsteps, and you're going to try to dig up something for which I deserve this? The bottom line, verse 28, the bottom line is you have to remember, a human being is made out of matter. A human being will rot and rot away just like anything that rots away. Just like even an article of clothing eventually gets eaten by a moth. That's what we are, and we have to recognize that and remember that when we approach God. This is a very, very, very powerful, beautiful, but in a haunting way, as is this entire book. Thank you for studying chapter 13 together with me. Looking forward to studying the next chapter 14, where Eov continues his response to his friends, and of course the entire book of Job together. Have a wonderful day.